We've got more NBA draft and trade rumors that are impacting the Pelicans, and I'll tell you the good and bad of it. Plus draft tiers and something Joe Dumars absolutely needs to do. It's the Wednesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with you on this Wednesday, we got a jam-packed show for you here. We're going to look at the latest rumors and some things that I've heard around the league when it comes to the Pelicans and the NBA draft. I want to tell you who Joe Dumars needs to reach, and it's not Zion Williamson. Plus, we're going to look at a couple of draft tiers, I think, in terms of positional rankings that I find kind of interesting. And it's going to tie into maybe trade down ideas. So a lot to cover in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. All right, let's get into some news here. So I want to start with something we talked about the other day, and that was Ace Bailey and the Pelicans trading up to get Ace Bailey at 3. And I said, that's a terrible idea. They should not do that. I don't care what you need to include to do it. There's no reason to go trade up for Ace Bailey. Talking to people around the league, he is easily the biggest wild card from what I'm gathering in terms of the first round. He could go 3. He could go 2. He's not going to go 2, but he could. He also could go to past 10, it sounds like. His range is just a little bit wild out there. Incredible talent, high upside, but that shot profile is really scaring off a lot of teams. They're worried about some of the effort on the defensive side of the ball and those type of questions about him right now. And then measuring a little bit smaller than what he appeared to be, that's certainly going to hurt him too. Look, if he was actually 6'10", teams would be lining up to get him, but at 6'7", 6'8", that does change things just a little bit, even if the wingspan is there. But what I was told, and this makes sense, and this is what I've said the other day, if Ace Bailey is there at 7, the Pelicans will take him. And frankly, in my opinion, even with the biggest questions around him, they should take him there. When you look at just overall tiers of the NBA draft, right? Cooper Flagg is in tier 1 by himself. Dylan Harper is kind of in tier 2 by himself, in my opinion. Then you have guys like VJ Edgecombe, Trey Johnson, Ace Bailey, and maybe Con Knipple is in there in that tier 3. You know, that's what I just said is 6 guys. Pelicans are picking 7. So if you have a chance to get one of those top 6 guys in this draft in terms of just upside talent at 7, you do it rather than picking from tier 4. And so I would not trade up for Ace Bailey. I think those rumors definitely came from Daryl Morey and the Philadelphia 76ers to try and kind of create some interest in that pick, because the 3rd pick in this draft is kind of where you're like, I don't know what to do here. And I think you're seeing the 76ers in not trouble. It's a good problem to have, but kind of in that position of what exactly are we supposed to do? And so they're using the Pelicans to try and, negotiate through the media, create leverage, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that stuff actually works, but teams do it all the time. That's what's happening here. But if Ace Bailey is there at 7, yes, you should take him just as a pure upside play. Gives you insurance a little bit to build around him in the future, and you could build around him, but the fit between him and Zion Williamson just doesn't quite work. But if you're not going to, if maybe it doesn't work, okay, you move Zion, you build around Ace Bailey, and it feels like you have some upside. Ace Bailey could, in theory, be the best player in this draft. I would not say that about guys like Con Knipple, Edgecombe, even Trey Johnson or Jeremiah Fears. Those are not guys that I think scream best player in this draft. Good players, yes, but not above Dylan Harper, Cooper Flagg. I do think Ace Bailey could work out that way, though. So if he's there at 7, yeah, you absolutely take him. I do not expect him to go below 7 in this draft. And if he's there at 7, I would imagine the Pelicans would take him. And there might also be teams calling, trying to trade up and get that pick, which could be a good thing to be in. And speaking of teams that are calling and trying to trade up, Brooklyn and OKC are certainly going to be trying to trade up just based off the accumulation of draft picks they have in this. The Nets have 5 picks in the top 36, I think it is. OKC has 2 first-round picks. OKC has literally everyone under contract next year. They could waive a guy, bring him back, or put him on a 2-way and free up a roster spot that way. But they can't draft 2 rookies. They're either going to look to trade out of the first round entirely or just trade up, take one guy, and then kind of figure out how to make it work during this. Same with Brooklyn, right? Like, they would love a top 4 pick in this, and I would not be shocked if they were to have traded their 4 first-round picks for a top 4 pick in this draft. I don't think a team would accept that, but it's worth keeping in mind and looking at when it comes to their kind of draft pick situation. Depending on how the draft falls, if Ace Bailey is there at 7, you could absolutely see the Brooklyn Nets trying to trade up and maybe getting that pick from the Pelicans here to draft that guy that they feel could build around a little bit more. Brooklyn's at 8, right? You know, if the Pelicans are like, we're going to take him, could you get Brooklyn's pick at 8 plus another first-round pick to drop down 1 spot? That might be worth doing. I'd still be okay with that, even with Ace Bailey is there, and it leads to interesting ideas about team building and different things when it comes to it. But both those teams, keep an eye on them on draft night. And speaking of draft night, deals are going to need to get done on draft night. I think this is going to be a very unpredictable first round from people I've been talking to. And these deals need to get done and accomplished, finalized on draft night for it to be done under this league year before the calendar switches on July 1 to the new league new year, where all of a sudden certain players are more expensive. You can't trade certain guys then. All of that's going to be a factor here. It is expecting to be a very spicy, let's call it, NBA draft night, I think. I will be live on the Locked On Pelicans YouTube page reacting to the pick immediately after it is made. I'll have some more details for you on that coming in the near future. So a couple of more things that I want to mention here, but let's save them for the next segment. I want to get into a couple more rumors and things that I'm hearing. We also have the invite list so far for the green room of the draft, which actually gives us pretty good intel. I want to get into Giannis a little bit, but the crux of the next segment here, the next bit on Locked On Pelicans, is this. I'll tease it for you. Joe Dumars doesn't need to get through to Zion. I'm pausing for dramatic effect. Joe Dumars needs to get through to Lee Anderson, Zion Williamson's stepdad. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Wayfair. There's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis, even if it is super hot here in New Orleans. So if you're wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it so easy to turn it into a space that feels like yours, comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. Wayfair is everything you need to level up your outdoor space. Conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, and yes, even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without a resort price tag. Look, I get all of my furniture on Wayfair. Also a secret, get your decor and art on Wayfair too. I have an awesome Jordan 1 print that's in my kitchen that's hanging up on the wall. Came from Wayfair. What I also love about Wayfair is delivery. It's free, fast, and totally hassle-free. If you go to a big box store or a place like that, do you have a truck to be able to lug something home? Do you have a hand truck to move it into upstairs and things like that? Probably not. Wayfair is going to deliver it right to your door completely free. So don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join us on YouTube as well. And by the way, we're going to have some news with another place to watch Locked On Pelicans coming soon. I'm excited about that one. There'll be more coming up with that one in the near future. For your second listen today, we're going to get back into the draft in this segment a little bit, but also mainly in the third segment as well. And if you want to know more about the draft, go check out the Locked On NBA Big Board show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I've also, by the way, got JJ Jackson of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast coming on later in the week to talk about Cayman Malawach, Con Knipple, Zion James, all the Duke prospects basically, because I'm curious his thoughts from watching them all season long, because I think those guys are some of the more interesting ones in this draft. That's coming later in the week. Analysis only you can only get on the Locked On Podcast Network with the local experts, your team every day. So a couple of quick rumors, and we'll get into the Joe Dumars thing here. We were talking about trades getting done on draft night. One thing I am not expecting on draft night or even this off season, and this does impact the Pelicans here, is I'm not expecting Giannis to get traded away from the Milwaukee Bucks. I think they're going to try and tough it out for another year with him, see what they look like, and then see if Damian Lillard coming back, who's going to miss probably the whole season, could feel like a game changer for them. If they end up with like the 4 seed without Damian Lillard just on the back of Giannis, and then Lillard's coming back, they're going to feel really good about what they're going to be capable of doing the following season. This impacts the Pelicans because they kind of control the Milwaukee Bucks future draft with swaps and things like that. I don't know what to make of the Pelicans next year, so the swap between them and Milwaukee next year is not as interesting, I think, as it could be otherwise. And certainly if Giannis is not traded, well, then it's not going to matter. That swap then becomes nothing and it isn't valuable in the slightest. But if Milwaukee's like, well, we're going to bottom out, we're going to tank, we're going to trade Giannis, yeah, you want to control your own draft picks. Otherwise, what's the point of being bad? So the Pelicans have to basically be included in any sort of deal, it feels like. And maybe the Pelicans aren't going to do that. Maybe they don't see, what they want in a trade like that. And they could be the reason Giannis doesn't get traded because of it, potentially. But I'm not anticipating him being moved from talking to people around the league right now. Other final thing before we get into Joe Dumars and who he needs to reach here is the NBA has invited 13 players to the green room so far. They're going to get it up to about 25 or so players. The names are kind of who you would expect here. Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, VJ Edgecombe, Trey Johnson, Cayman Malawach, Jeremiah Fierce, Con Knipple, Kasparis Yakachonis, Yegor Demine, Carter Bryant, Derek Queen, Asa Newell. You imagine Noah Essengue will as well, but he is playing in Europe currently. That puts you about 14 people, leaves you about 11, 12 more that are going to get invited to the green room here. The way they invite these people is they kind of poll teams around the league and they ask teams to vote on the 25 prospects they expect to come off the board first. That's how they kind of build the green room out. All of these players here are expected to go into the top 25. So if there's one of these names you want or some of the other names that we're going to see invited to this, if the Pelicans are trading down and they want one of those guys, your pick better be in the top 25. Now, you get some outliers. Last year was the first year that the draft second round was on the next day. Kyle Filipowski, Johnny Furphy were both selected in the second round, but were in the green room and had to wait. So that's obviously going to happen to probably one or two of these guys. But looking at this board so far and likely who's going to get invited, I don't see one of those situations, at least with the names that we know so far. So let's get into kind of the meat of this. And shout out Rick from Double Dealer here, who kind of put this idea in my head when I was talking to him on Saturday. Go check out Double Dealer. Awesome spot. So we've talked a lot about, it feels like deck chairs on the Titanic, right? Like, is this the year that Zion gets it? Is this the person that gets through to Zion Williamson, right? Look, obviously, David Griffin and him did not get off on the right foot. We can go back to the bubble, right? And the piano playing story and all of that stuff. Like, they just weren't able to connect with Zion Williamson in a way that just was productive. And that led to the way I describe it as a lot of friction between Zion Williamson, his camp, and the organization, for the first couple of years. And things admittedly have gotten better. And I think they would have all said that they're in a much better spot. There seemed to be more trust and things like that, right? But you could see it where Zion wanted to play in that Sun series after missing the whole season, and the team was like, no, under no circumstances. And it was obvious he wasn't going to play. And obviously he shouldn't have played either, right? But we've seen some of that where maybe he wants to play, but the team's like, no, hold on. We're going to hold you out here. All of that has led to whatever, right? Friction is the way that I call it. That's an all-encompassing, you can make of that what you will kind of term. So David Griffin was never able to get through to him. So the hope is that Joe Dumars will get through to him, right? And what I've said is like, I find that concept a little bit like, I kind of wave it away, right? Look, Joe Dumars is Joe Dumars. David Griffin is David Griffin. They are dramatically different people for a variety of reasons, right? So maybe Joe Dumars is the one to do that. But look, Joe Dumars isn't coaching the team. He's not spending excessive amounts of time with Zion Williamson on a day-to-day basis. Yes, they can go have lunch, dinner, share meals together, watch some of the playoffs together. But during the season, you're not going to be able to do that, right? Joe Dumars isn't going to spend every minute with Zion Williamson or even every day with Zion Williamson during the off season. We've seen that. And look, they've also put people that should have been able to get through to Zion Williamson and in some sense did in someone like Teresa Witherspoon. We knew how close they were, right? She's a basketball Hall of Famer. If there's someone that's going to get through to him, it's someone like that. Swin Cash, same kind of idea. Look, JJ Redick was brought in, a Duke guy for all of that. Trajan Langdon. There were people that should have gotten through to Zion Williamson and didn't. So yeah, Joe Dumars is different than all of those. He's much more accomplished, at the NBA. I don't want to say as a basketball player overall compared to Teaspoon and Swin Cash. I think you could debate that, but Joe Dumars is about as accomplished as they come here. So maybe Zion will listen to him, right? But if he didn't listen to everyone else, I'm not sure that it's gonna sink in from Joe Dumars, right? When Zion is renting a place during the offseason to kind of get away and do his workouts, is he doing what you need him to do? We saw the video of him getting tattooed and what his body looked like. We saw him just come into the season not in shape, right? He wasn't. The first 4 games of the year, he only played 6 games. Yeah, 6 games before that hamstring injury occurred. In the first 4 of them, he was shooting below 40% from the field and averaging like 18 points, 5 assists, 8.5 rebounds. Then it started to pick up against Indiana and Cleveland, but you had 2 inactive games during that time. Then the weird hamstring injury of when did it occur and all of that. None of this was great, right? And he missed the opening game with illness. We would just like Zion to come in tremendous shape and do all the right things and be ready to go from game 1 and not have to play himself into game shape. He did that this year, right? He, the metrics in his contract to guarantee, partial guarantee, all that stuff. Part of it is body fat and weight percentage, and he passed that metric. He looked physically better than we've ever seen him, played his best basketball when he returned from that injury, which was in January 7th. How about you just play the whole season in tremendous shape, not later in the year, would be something that everyone is hopeful here. But that has just not been the case for Zion. There's regularly him just not being ready at the level you want at the start of the regular season. So I am skeptical Joe Dumars will get through to Zion Williamson because of that. But Joe Dumars doesn't need to get through to Zion Williamson. He needs to get through to Lee Anderson, Zion Williamson's stepfather. That is clearly, from all accounts, the person Zion Williamson listens to the most. I'm not going to debate whether he should or not. Zion is allowed to choose his own company and listen to who he wants to listen to. I truly mean that, right? But clearly his career has not gone the way that he would have wanted. And look, maybe when they were coming into the league and you have this Pelicans team that has not really accomplished anything ever at the NBA level, right? And, he comes in here and it's like, well, we're not going to listen to you. There's some, I kind of understand that to a certain period of time, right? You go to certain teams, they kind of tell you what to do, how things should be, and you're going to listen to them because they have a track record of results. Here, that is not what the team has. They do not have the track record of results for all of this. So if Lee Anderson is giving Zion advice or advising him in certain areas and you realize yeah, maybe I'm going to listen to my stepdad who's always been there for me, looking out for the best for me all the time, over people you don't have real relationships with who have not kind of proven it at the NBA level, even though David Griffin won a title, right? I actually get that a little bit. But Joe Dumars is someone you're going to need to listen to. And if you look at probably when, I don't know Lee Anderson's age off the top of my head, but he probably watched a ton of Joe Dumars. Has some admiration, you would hope, for Joe Dumars in a sense. Everyone should have respect for Joe Dumars. And if Joe Dumars goes to Lee Anderson, it's like, this is how things need to be, you hope Lee Anderson would listen to him. And I think he will, right? And that's how you hope that it gets through to Zion, that when they are working on his off-season training regimen, when they're deciding where to be, how to structure things, that all of a sudden the person who kind of decides all of that is listening to Joe Dumars, and it's not so much Zion that's kind of planning all that. You have people for that. Every NBA player does. They listen to their representation, which Zion Williamson changed, right? You listen to the people that you trust. And I totally understand that, right? Look, I call my parents on occasion asking for advice for things. I'm almost 40. So that's a natural thing to do. And you hope now with Joe Dumars that he can reach, almost like the gatekeepers in a sense, right? You don't call up the CEO to like try and get a meeting because they're not going to answer. You've got to get to the gatekeeper of the CEO and get them to put a meeting on, right? That's kind of what I'm saying here. And Joe Dumars is the type of person, maybe you don't respect David Griffin. It's really tough not to respect Joe Dumars. And if you don't, that's an even bigger problem in terms of approach from that side of things. And so hopefully with Joe Dumars and his reputation, around the league and with everything that he has accomplished, it gets through to the correct people, the families and all of that. And that's going to have a very big positive impact on this team. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is that the right person to reach? So coming up next, we're going to go a little bit rapid fire when it comes to some draft rankings, or I might change this segment because we're running out of time here. I've gone a little bit long today, but I want to point out a couple of prospects I think that could be pretty interesting for New Orleans, that keep an eye on them a little bit more, especially in trade down opportunities. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. Look, it's the summer, and that means MLB. And if you're traveling and want to go to a game, the best way to do it is with Game Time. You can get killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees. Game Time is a total game changer. I'll be spending some time out in Los Angeles. I plan on going to a couple of Dodger games, and I'm going to be getting my tickets over at Game Time. What I love about it, especially if you're going to a place that you've never been, seat views. You can see the exact view before you buy, so there are no surprises. And look, even during big-time playoff matchups and other things, Knicks versus Celtics, zone deals were offering 60% off in great seats at the last minute, so you could go to a game for cheap. You've also got the NFL schedule out. Start making your plans now with Game Time. You can grab seats for as low as $100 thanks to exclusive discounts. And with the Game Time guarantee, your tickets are 100% authentic and will arrive on time, and you're always going to get the best price with fees included. So what you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans, and check out Locked On Saints. Minicamp has started. Ross Jackson's boots on the ground there. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make Locked On Saints your second listen. So I'm going to shift this up because I've gone a little bit long in today's show. I want to highlight a few prospects to really keep an eye on. I've talked about Noah Essengue before. I think, if he can make it, he'd get an invite to the green room in the NBA draft. Keep an eye if the Pelicans are looking for a lead guard and Dylan Harper is off the board, Jeremiah Fears is off the board. I don't expect Jeremiah Fears to be there at 7. Trading down and going for someone like Nolan Traore, if you don't believe in Yegor Demin or Kasparis Yakichonis, could make sense. He's out of San Quentin in France. He's a point guard there. He started off as a top 5 guy. He's dropped a little bit, but now he's kind of playing into the mid-lottery, I think. That's a guy that is worth keeping an eye on as someone to look at. He's got good size at 6'4". He might be one of the fastest guys in this draft, I think. Really good speed. He's a really good shot creator, downhill attacker. 3-point percentage is not great, but he's shown a good propensity to make his free throws. In terms of bigs, by the way. Also keep an eye on Ben Suraf too. Really good size, really dynamic passer who does not shoot particularly well, and that is a concern for me when it comes to that type of player. Rasheer Fleming of St. Joseph's, if they're looking for a big power forward that can shoot, that's a guy that I think is going to be good. He looks like he could be a top-end starter as well at the NBA level, a little bit older as a junior, but a younger junior, at least for that class. Really good athleticism. All of the signs say his three-point shot is good. That's someone that I'm really starting to kind of get high on. I've been very high on a guy like Thomas Sorber from Georgetown. Just insane size at 6'11", really big, a good enough defender, but he can also defend in space. I really like that from him with really good instincts. And by the way, really great hands for a big man. Big man, the ball gets thrown, it hits their hands and they drop the ball. Not a great thing. You really see it against teams like the Thunder where they will turn you over if that ends up being the case. But he is someone that if Cayman Malawatch is there, if you do not like Derek Queen, and I'm lower on Derek Queen than others are, a guy like Thomas Sorber makes, I think, a lot of sense here for a number of teams, including the Pelicans, if you just want kind of a guy, in my opinion, that is NBA ready to be a starting big man. It depends on what you think about Yves Missi. I'm not sure that Yves Missi is a high-end starter. Maybe he's more of a rotational big. Getting him at 21, that's fine, in my opinion. But Sorber's a guy that I think could be a really good player as well. You already know about my love, too, for Maxime Reynaud out of Stanford, as well as just a more versatile big. Very different type of player than Sorber is, as Reynaud doesn't really have much of a post presence. I went a little long on some of the topics here, but I'm going to wrap it up. So we'll get more into draft tomorrow. We'll get JJ Jackson from Locked On Duke on as well. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Announcements to come, more guests to come. It's going to be a fun week here on Locked On Pelicans. See y'all next time.